coach. I don't think it's right. I don't think the players buy it. Great reporting by Jane Slater yesterday. I think the Cowboys are in a rebuild. I think their owner has to admit they're in a rebuild, and this is the downside to having an owner as a general manager. Jerry's often very busy doing local radio hits on Monday. Oh, boy. Let's offer a solution in this rebuild. Where the Cowboys deep? Wide receiver. Really deep. Cedric Wilson's their 4. Cedric Wilson can play. Amari's a really good player. Michael Gallup is excellent. CeeDee Lamb is really talented. It's time to trade Michael Gallup. 3rd year of a 4-year contract. You're going to have to pay him pretty quick. You need cap help, and you need to rebuild, and you do not need a 4th really good wide receiver. CeeDee Lamb looks potentially spectacular. Cedric Wilson can absolutely play as a great 3, and Amari's a 1. Trade him. You're 2-4. It doesn't matter if you can win the division. You're in a rebuild. The Ravens desperately need another 2 receiver. Chicago after Allen Robinson with Tariq Cohen out. The more Chicago wins, Chicago's got the coach, the defense, and 1 star. The Bears and the Ravens are dying for a number 2 receiver. I'll tell you another one. The Green Bay Packers, the Colts. These are good teams. I think the Patriots, but they probably wouldn't do it, right? They don't spend on anything. They already got burned by Mohamed Sanu. They probably won't do it. But, you know, I remember as a kid hearing this. First step for an alcoholic is admitting they're an alcoholic. And the first step in the NFL to a rebuild is admitting we're in a rebuild. The Giants are admitting it. Washington's admitting it. Miami, by the way, going with Tua. They're admitting it. Miami's like, hey, they can make the playoffs. But they know we're still in the rebuild mode. And that's okay. My entire life watching the NFL, at least 25% of the NFL is in a rebuild. Joy's been watching it forever. There's always like 7 teams in a rebuild. Dallas is, they just don't want to admit it. Arizona is, crushed Dallas, and they're in a rebuild. So to me, Amari Cooper, excellent. Cedric Wilson, shockingly good. CeeDee Lamb, you just took him in the 1st round. Get him more looks. You are more than good enough at wide receiver. And Michael Gallup it's funny how this works. For whatever reason at the trading deadline, it's always this way. You got teams that are good. Chicago and Baltimore are good. But they feel like, man, how do we beat Patrick Mahomes? We got it. Michael Gallup's a big physical receiver. He's a big red zone presence. He can go deep. That is where Baltimore, that can't beat Kansas City, in their eyes, it's not going to be a guard. They got plenty of running back. It's going to be like, can we get a cheap touchdown? Because Kansas City, we got to outscore them. Can we get a cheap touchdown? Chicago, similarly, looks at Green Bay and looks at Aaron Rodgers and like, okay, we're at a deficit when we play Green Bay because of Aaron Rodgers. How do we solve the deficit? Allen Robinson's a great 1. Gallup's a number 2. It's like, okay, now we may have a better 1 and 2 than Green Bay at wide receiver to elevate Nick Foles. This is the way. I don't know why it is wide receiver, but that's always the position at the trading deadline where a good team goes, okay, there's this offense in our conference. There's this offense in our division. There's this quarterback in our division. And if you're Baltimore and you're like, Big Ben's on fire plus that defense, and you look around, Tannehill's on fire. Michael Gallup's a really attractive piece. Get a 2nd-round pick for him. You probably won't get a player because good teams don't want to give up player. Go get a 2nd-round pick. Then next year you got a 1st and 2 seconds. That's 3 starters. Get them all on defense. But you got to admit you're in a rebuild because you are. Peter King, I asked Peter King yesterday, like, what does this organization have to do to get back to where they were about 4 years ago, where they had a bunch of good young players? I mean, right now, the Cowboys' offensive line is old. Their defensive line, the best player is Aldon Smith. They have 1 corner I like. The rest of the secondary you can have. They have a tight end who's capable but not special. When you have when your offensive and defensive lines are issues, you're officially rebuilding. I don't care who's at quarterback. If your offensive and defensive lines are old, average, beat up, you're rebuilding. Peter King yesterday.
The way you solve it, I think, is going back to the same kind of meat and potatoes that made them pick Zach Martin over Johnny Manziel in the draft. That's what they have to do. They can't be emotional about their team right now. And they are playing right now without 3 of the 5 building blocks on your offensive line right now. With the offensive line they put on the field, they're incapable of being a dominant team.
They are. It's rebuild time. Jerry, get off local radio. Call the Bears GM. Call the Ravens GM. Start the rebuild now. I don't care if you're going to win the division. You're going to get, if you did, you're going to get, the Giants today may win that division. You'd get baked if you got into the playoffs anyway. Joy with the news.
No. Turn on the news. This is the Herdline News.
Oh, well, another team that may be rebuilding soon, is rebuilding soon, is the Falcons, 2-4, last place in the NFC South. And even though trades involving star players are usually not common during the regular NFL season, some people are wondering if the Falcons could blow up their roster.
This is this thing. We said this 2 weeks ago. It sounds crazy. But Matt Ryan, to me, I feel like I'm getting an older Matt Ryan, and I'm looking around, Joy, at all these dynamic quarterbacks. I think you can get something for Matt.
Well, according to ESPN's Dan Graziano and Jeremy Fowler, there are people who think that they could be shopped before the trade deadline in 2 weeks. So Matt Ryan's 35. He has 3 more years remaining on his contract after this season that pay him $30 million annually. Jones is also signed through 2023 at an average salary of $22 million. So 2 really high salaries. Trading Ryan would result in an immediate cap acceleration of $44.4 million, and the Falcons currently have less than $2 million in cap space. So obviously, this is a massive move off of their cap situation.
You know what? But I respect it. In the Super Bowl a couple years ago, they're just blowing it up. They're like, coach out, GM out, quarterback out. And by the way, instead of arguing for 3 years that you're not in a rebuild, Atlanta's like, okay, we got to the Super Bowl with Matt Ryan. We should have won a Super Bowl. We didn't. But we look around the league right now. Let's start over. I totally respect that by Atlanta. Acknowledging we just don't feel that we're special at that position.
And look, Julio Jones is still a big-time talent in the league. Yeah. And Matt Ryan still has some football to play. So this isn't a bad situation for either of them either. Things come to an end. And it really feels like, to your point, Atlanta just keeps trying to push through what happened with the Super Bowl, and every year it's just progressively gotten worse.
Yep.
So just call it.
That's right.
Just stop dragging out a situation that everyone can see is not working, and that doesn't mean that Matt Ryan can't go somewhere else and have success, or that Julio won't either. Yeah. But that cap situation is a nightmare if you're not moving forward, and you're 2-4 and you're in last place in the division. So you have to do something drastic at that point. So Trevor Lawrence will undoubtedly be the #1 pick in the NFL draft this year, and former NFL wide receiver Roddy White has some advice for the Clemson quarterback.
Now, if I'm Trevor Lawrence, if the Jets finish with no wins, I just go back to Clemson. I'm just going to go back for another year. I don't want any part of that organization, because it would be awful for you to get drafted by the Jets, because they do not know how to put anything together over there as far as quarterbacking, as far as weapons around the quarterback, as far as anything that has to do with offensive talent. As far as offense, man, that team is just bad at picking players.
I don't disagree with him as far as the Jets go, but here's the problem. Whoever has the #1 pick in the draft is going to be a bad team. That's why they have the #1 pick in the draft.
Yeah, but yes, you're right. That is right. But I think the Giants are bad, but I trust their ownership because I've seen it win championships. The Jets are bad, and I don't trust their ownership. There's a difference between bads. Like Miami with Brian Flores right now, I'm like, this is moving in the right direction.
Yeah. But there's a massive risk with this as well. You could go back to Clemson and get injured.
Oh, no. I wouldn't go back to Clemson. What I would do is do what Elway and Eli did.
Oh, I think that's a terrible idea for multiple reasons. One, you're not dissing San Diego. You're not dissing Jacksonville. You're dissing New York City. That's a place I don't want to have a pass to go to, okay? That's a big, I'm not going to the New York Jets. That's a pretty big deal. Also, this is not Eli Manning and Peyton Manning's NFL. There's social media now. If you go somewhere else and you're not a multiple-time Super Bowl winner, you're going to hear that for the rest of your career. So you better be successful.